The world was falling apart. The great powers that once ruled the earth were crumbling under the weight of an unimaginable threat. Nations that had stood strong for centuries now found themselves powerless, their mighty military forces unable to withstand the relentless alien assault. The first signs of collapse came in the form of surprise attacks, massive fleets of alien ships descending from the skies, firing advanced weaponry that seemed to defy all logic. Cities were vaporized in an instant, leaving behind nothing but scorched earth and the shattered remains of what was once a thriving civilization. No one was safe. The shock waves of destruction rippled across the globe, and within weeks, governments were in disarray, unable to protect their citizens or defend their borders. The people who had once looked to their leaders for guidance were now left to fend for themselves in a world that was rapidly becoming unrecognizable. The collapse of major powers was swift and unforgiving. In Europe, the European Union dissolved into chaos as member states fell one by one. The United States, once the most powerful country on Earth, quickly found itself overwhelmed as alien forces swept across its borders. Cities like New York and Washington, D.C. were leveled, and military defenses crumbled. The government, unable to react with the speed needed to counter the alien assault, quickly disbanded, leaving the population in a state of panic. In Asia, nations like China and India fought fiercely, but their military might proved no match for the invaders' superior technology. Even Russia, with its vast landmass and nuclear arsenal, could do little to stop the alien onslaught. Desperation spread like wildfire, and soon, the world's most powerful nations were nothing more than hollow shells of their former selves. The collapse was not just military, it was economic and social. Markets crashed, infrastructure broke down, and supply chains disintegrated. The global economy, once a finely tuned machine, was left in ruins. The cities, once symbols of human achievement, became graveyards, their towering skyscrapers now nothing more than crumbling ruins. The remaining human population was scattered, with survivors clinging to whatever scraps of civilization they could find. Amid the devastation, the alien invaders showed no mercy. They were not here to negotiate or offer peace. They were here to conquer. The alien forces spread quickly, leaving a trail of destruction that seemed unstoppable. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Their weapons could destroy entire cities with a single strike, and their soldiers were invincible, clad in armor that no conventional weapon could penetrate. As one nation after another fell, humanity's sense of security disappeared. People who once believed that their nations would endure for generations now saw their homes, their families, and their way of life slipping away. In the blink of an eye, the world had changed forever. What had been a thriving, interconnected, global community was now a fractured and disjointed collection of survivors, each struggling to survive in a world where the rules had been rewritten by the invaders. For most, the idea of rebuilding seemed impossible. The major powers of the earth had fallen, and with them, humanity's confidence. The once vibrant cities now lay in ruin, their streets empty and silent. The governments that had ruled with authority were no more, and the people were left to pick up the pieces of a shattered world. In this new reality, survival had become the only priority, and it seemed that the hopes of the human race had dimmed, eclipsed by the overwhelming power of their alien conquerors. Yet, amidst the destruction, a flicker of resilience remained. The survivors knew one thing: no matter how hopeless things seemed, they were still alive. And as long as they were alive, there was still a chance to fight back. The air crackled with tension as the world watched in horror, helpless against the unimaginable force that had been unleashed upon them. The aliens, with their cold and calculated precision, had kept their true power hidden until now, playing the long game while humanity struggled to mount a defense. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The superweapon, a terrifying new technology unlike anything seen before, was deployed, and the fate of the world was sealed. The first strike came without warning. In mere seconds, an entire city was wiped from the map, its skyline crumbling into a cloud of dust and debris. The weapon, an energy-based technology, radiated with an unnatural, searing glow as it ripped through buildings and infrastructure, leaving nothing but scorched earth in its wake. The world's leaders, already battered and broken, could only watch in disbelief as their worst fears were realized. Humanity had never known such destruction. The scale of the alien superweapon was beyond comprehension. With a single discharge, it annihilated anything in its path, and there was no way to defend against it. Conventional weapons, missiles, bombs, and lasers were rendered useless. The aliens had perfected a weapon that could harness and manipulate energy on a scale that no one had thought possible. Even the most advanced human technology stood no chance. Nations that had once been powerful were struck down in a matter of hours, their military defenses shattered like glass. The weapon was not just a tool of destruction, it was a symbol of the alien invaders' superiority. As the attacks continued, entire regions vanished, their populations wiped out with terrifying efficiency. The world's once imposing military powers now looked feeble and insignificant. Attempts to counter the alien onslaught were futile, and with each passing day, hope seemed to slip further away. Desperation set in as governments and military leaders scrambled to respond, but their efforts were in vain. It was clear that the aliens had no intention of negotiating or showing mercy. They were here to conquer, and this weapon was their final, devastating blow to humanity's last defenses. The alien superweapon's power was beyond anything humanity could fathom. It could disintegrate entire cities, evaporating buildings, and people in an instant, leaving behind nothing but barren landscapes. There was no warning before the strike, no time to evacuate or prepare. It was an attack that struck without mercy, and the survivors were left to pick up the pieces of a world that no longer resembled the one they had known. As each new strike hit, the morale of the human race crumbled further. The survivors, already battered from the previous battles, now faced the harsh reality that their weapons were no match for the alien technology. The people began to question whether survival was even possible. They had come to a grim realization. This weapon wasn't just a tool of war. It was a symbol of their inevitable defeat. The alien invaders had unleashed a power that not only destroyed their cities, but shattered the very idea that humanity could fight back. Those who survived the initial onslaught fled to underground shelters, remote areas, and abandoned facilities, trying to escape the alien gaze, but it was never enough. Every hiding place, every last refuge seemed temporary, and with the superweapon still in play, the feeling of safety was nothing more than an illusion. People could not escape the overwhelming sense of doom that had gripped the planet. It became clear that this weapon was not just a tactical advantage. It was the final step in an invasion that would leave no corner of the Earth untouched. With no countermeasure in sight, humanity found itself at the mercy of the invaders and their terrifying technology. The superweapon had shifted the balance of power irreversibly. As entire cities disappeared and millions perished, the world was thrust into a new era, one where survival was a question of luck and timing, and where humanity's chances seemed slimmer with every passing day. The alien invaders had shown their true hand, and the human race was left reeling in the aftermath, unsure if they could rise again or if their civilization would fall to dust like so many before them. Amidst the ruins of a shattered world, the survivors gathered in what was known as the Last Refuge, a final sanctuary, a desperate attempt at holding on to the last remnants of humanity. The surrounding world had been consumed by chaos. Entire nations had collapsed under the alien onslaught, and with each passing day, the landscape of the Earth became more unrecognizable. The once vibrant cities lay in ruins, their skeletal remains casting long shadows over the desolate wastelands. It was in this apocalyptic setting that the Last Refuge emerged, a stronghold hidden deep in a remote mountain range. The mountain fortress was designed to be the final bastion of human resistance, a place where the remnants of civilization could regroup, rebuild, and perhaps, against all odds, stage one last stand. The entrance was secretive, concealed by harsh terrain and natural barriers that made it nearly impossible for the aliens to discover. Within its walls, the survivors found shelter, people from every corner of the world who had managed to escape the relentless advance of the alien forces. There were soldiers, scientists, doctors, engineers, and ordinary citizens, all united by the same desperate goal: survival. However, despite the safety the refuge provided, the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of despair. Each day, the survivors saw fewer faces. Some had perished in the initial waves of the invasion, others from the alien strikes that had devastated entire regions. The rest were slowly succumbing to the harsh conditions that had plagued their new home. The resources were limited, and without outside help, sustaining even a small group had proven to be a challenge. Food, medicine, and water were rationed, and the once optimistic spirit that had marked the beginning of their refuge had now given way to a grim realization. This place, for all its protection, was not invulnerable. The world outside had fallen, and now the survivors had become even more isolated. Their once strong nations had disappeared, and communication with the outside world had been severed. Hope, once a steady companion, had begun to fade into the shadows of the last few remaining hearts. Despite the overwhelming sense of defeat, something burned within these survivors. A spark of resistance, fragile yet determined, flickered in: the darkness. This last refuge was not just a hideout. It was a reminder of humanity's strength, a place where survivors could come together and fight against the odds. The refugees knew that without action, without the courage to face the alien forces, the world as they knew it would be gone forever. Yet, even as they gathered within their mountain sanctuary, the specter of alien power loomed large. Reports continued to arrive, detailing the relentless march of the invaders, their forces closing in on humanity's last strongholds. The alien superweapon, still operational, had turned whole regions into nothing more than wastelands. Cities vanished in the blink of an eye, and humanity was left in the dust. The walls of the refuge felt smaller every day as the outside world grew darker. No one knew how long they could survive or how long the last pockets of humanity could hold out against the overwhelming force of the aliens. But the refugees held on to one thing: resilience. In the heart of the mountain, amidst the desperate days and long, sleepless nights, the human will to survive burned brightly. The survivors may have been few, their resources may have been stretched thin, but there was still a pulse within this last bastion of humanity. There were whispers of resistance, small plans beginning to take shape among the survivors. The last refuge was more than just an escape. It was the final stand, a place where the human spirit, battered and bruised, would gather its strength for what could be its last fight. The battle for survival wasn't over yet, and while the odds seemed insurmountable, the refuge became the symbol of the final, desperate hope of a world teetering on the brink of annihilation. In the shadow of impending doom, a glimmer of hope emerged from the deepest corners of the last refuge. The survivors, battered and broken by the relentless onslaught of alien forces, had begun to accept the harsh reality that their world was slipping away. Yet, in their darkest hour, the human spirit, ever resilient, refused to be extinguished. Amidst the dire circumstances, a small group of individuals, a mix of military leaders, scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens, came together. They had long known that survival alone was not enough. A mere existence in hiding would never suffice. The human race needed a way to fight back, to reclaim their home and preserve the legacy of their civilization. In hushed whispers and secretive meetings, a plan began to form, fragile yet daring, a plan that could perhaps change the course of their doomed fate. The idea was audacious, bordering on impossible. It was not a simple military strategy or a desperate counterattack. It was something much more intricate, something that could shift the balance of power in ways that no one had ever imagined. A secret project, long kept hidden within the walls of the refuge, had become the cornerstone of this plan. The scientists who had once studied the alien technology with awe and fear had discovered something extraordinary. Amidst their research, they had found a weakness, a crack in the aliens' seemingly impenetrable armor. The aliens, for all their advanced technology, had made a fatal flaw. They underestimated humanity's ingenuity. The secret plan revolved around exploiting this weakness, developing a weapon that could not only counter the alien superweapon but potentially turn the tide of the war. It was a weapon built from the remnants of human knowledge and alien technology, a hybrid of both, created in the most unlikely of places, within the very walls of the refuge. The idea was not to fight the aliens with brute force, but to outsmart them, to strike at the heart of their power, and to use their own arrogance against them. In the dark, forgotten corners of the facility, a group of engineers worked tirelessly, building prototypes, testing theories, and refining the design of the weapon. It was a race against time, for the aliens were closing in on the refuge, and the survivors knew they could not hold out forever. Every moment mattered. The plan had risks, tremendous risks. The weapon could fail, and the survivors could face complete annihilation. But the desperation, the raw need for survival, gave the humans the courage to press forward. No longer willing to be mere victims of fate, they embraced the idea of taking back their world, of fighting against the overwhelming force that had stolen their future. As the weapon neared completion, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. It was the last hope, the only chance the survivors had. But despite the uncertainty, a fire had been ignited within the refuge. The survivors, once fragmented and uncertain, began to rally together. There was purpose now, a mission greater than survival, one that called on every ounce of courage, intelligence, and strength they had left. They had one shot at this. The world outside remained a battlefield, but within the walls of the last refuge, a different kind of battle was being fought, a battle for hope. The secret plan, born in the face of darkness and despair, had the potential to change everything. The survivors might have been on the brink of extinction, but with this final act, they could defy the odds. The aliens, once so sure of their dominance, might now be facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Humanity, not in hiding, but fighting back with everything they had. In the heart of a shattered world, the spark of hope had been kindled once more, and with it, a new determination to fight for a future, no matter how uncertain or impossible it seemed.